Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the top 5 free or low-cost ways to get your online presence in order. My name is Nick Fry, and I'm the Manager of Business Development for Tourism Nova Scotia. This is the second webinar in our series, and bear with us. We're all working remotely, so you may see some pets or kids walking in the background. But it's just one of those challenges we are currently dealing with. Really, thank you for taking the time to visit with us during these unprecedented times and during the pandemic, and as well as the recent tragic events in Nova Scotia. So we're offering this weekly webinar series to offer practical information to help you with your business, to help guide through as we go through this crisis, and to be ready to welcome visitors when the time is right. So after the webinar, we'll send out an email which will have a copy of the presentation. We will have a copy of the video of the webinar. We'll have a questionnaire just to let us know, get some feedback to see, just make sure we're offering the best webinar possible. We'll also let you know about our upcoming webinars, as well as our partners at Digital Nova Scotia. I understand we have people here that may not be familiar with Tourism Nova Scotia. We are the provincial marketing organization for the province of Nova Scotia. We market Nova Scotia as a vacation destination and lead initiatives to help grow the tourism industry. So this webinar was made possible by a partnership with Digital Nova Scotia. So I'd like to welcome Robert Haldane and Hannah Edgar from Digital Nova Scotia. They are on the panel, and if anyone has any questions or anything around this webinar or upcoming webinars, we can answer them, or our partners at Digital Nova Scotia can as well. So if you have a question throughout, just please go to the bottom, the Q&A section, and type it in, and we'll moderate the questions, and we'll make sure that Allison gets to answer them for you. So really excited that we get to help Allison there today with the questions. Also, to let you know, we're going to try to keep the questions, of course, focused on the topic at hand, but we're always welcome and available to answer any of your questions. So send us a private message on here. All of our contact information will come up at the end. And really wanted to let you know that we're just really excited to share this information with you. Also, we have a really excellent resource on our website about COVID-19. It has updates, resources to help you navigate any potential programs that are available to help, and a really, really strong FAQ, which really helps to navigate some of those difficult questions that we're all facing right now. So, of course, we all know that everyone's practicing social distancing at home, and many businesses are closed or minimizing services. And this is an opportunity for you to take a look at your online presence and your website. And Allison K Consulting will talk about some of the low-hanging fruit we can approach to help improve our online presence. It's going to be jargon-free with many tips, Allison promises. It will leave you with a clear understanding of the next steps and tactics to help your business take immediate action to upgrade your online profile. So I'm going to transfer it over to Allison K Consulting now. She's going to share the top 5 free or low-cost ways to get your online presence in order. Allison K Consulting provides strategic web and brand design for service-based businesses and organizations. When it comes to web and design, she is a linchpin. So thank you again for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to transfer over to Allison right now to start her presentation.
Fantastico. Here we go. We're going to share. Excellent. And ensuring that everyone can see pawns at play on the screen and myself as a spotlight host. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me into your homes, into your offices, into your garages, wherever it might be that I'm hanging out with you this morning. And absolutely, right now, it seems like March dragged on, and now April has speeding past us, and we're entering into spring. And I definitely understand the feeling, the apprehensions that we have around what are we saying right now if our businesses are not open right now, or if we have reduced service. So today, my hope is that I can give you 5 free or low-cost ways to get your online presence in order, as that's one of those things that can help us while we might not be able to be physically present with our key audience, we need to still ensure that we're available to people and that they're curious about what we're doing. So my goal today is we're going to talk about 5 of them. And let me just get this going. We're going to talk about newsletters, Google My Business, website auditing, social media automation, and Google Analytics. And my hope is that out of these, you should leave with an idea of 1 or 2 that you can start immediately in the times that you have, and that you will be able to, from these, understand how they're going to work as far as what you have availability for time, any caveats that we have with them, anything like any known friction that occurs with them, so that you can do the best that you can with your online presence. So we will be talking a little bit about cost. We'll talk about time and resources, because of course, if it's not costing you something, it's going to cost you time perhaps, or some people on the webinar today are an operation of 1 and some are an operation of many. So how can we share those duties with people? The level of difficulty is always key. I definitely understand that most of us might have a bit more time on our hands or resources, but we don't want to get stuck trying to do something and having roadblocks due to our own skill sets. And also any obstacles that are faced, that way that when we leave this webinar today, you should have a really strong idea of what is going to work for you and what maybe you want to put on the plate later. And as well, this series is aimed at both those who might be new to some of these concepts, or those of you who have been doing it for a little while and maybe it's on the back burner because of other things, or you're looking for the next steps. So let's hop right into it, my darlings. So we're going to start off with newsletters. And I find that these are often the unsung hero when it comes to your online presence. One great thing about them is that they allow you to have a touch point with your audience and your guests in times that you can't do it, such as social media, which is a little bit more required that the algorithm is going to show people what they want to see. In times like this, these can be a great way to offer messaging that's a lot more tender and also a lot more, let's say, close and approachable than you might have to do in, say, general ways of marketing yourself and having your online presence. And if you are a company that's still using, say, Gmail or your Outlook, and you're sending out BCCs to your key audience and your key guests, now's the time to think about getting into these platforms, because they're really easy to use these days. They do a lot of template systems, you repeating prior campaigns that you have. So when it comes to the tech continuum of using newsletters, it's actually quite easy to use these days. And of course, the only caveat that most people have with newsletters isn't the systems themselves, it's what kind of content are we going to create with these? And I'm going to help you with that today. So as far as pros with newsletters is that, like I said, they're a low-cost way to remain top of mind. What's happening with newsletters is that people are giving their consent for you to have a conversation with them in their inboxes, which is incredibly precious and incredibly, it's a gold mine that you can have an opportunity to have conversations with people. And with them, we've kind of gone beyond just broadcasting messages. It's now easy to track what people are actually interested in. So we're no longer just sending out a blast and hoping people click a button and go to our website. We can track how they're opening it. We can track what links they're clicking, and we can even find out if they're forwarding that newsletter to somebody else. So as a business, this is an opportunity in using newsletters to grow your presence, because you're having a stronger understanding of what's happening with your audience, and you can cater to them. And it also helps you in your business because it costs making guesswork as to what you're going to talk about next or where you're going to focus. And above and beyond just a delivery of newsletters, you can get into segmentation, or known as targeting specific readers. And this can be useful for anyone's business that might be a bit multifaceted. So let's say, for example, your business not only has a physical lodging facility, but you also have a restaurant on site, and maybe you also organize retreats. So those are 3 different kinds of audiences. Now, if you're on social media and you're sending out a tweet or a Facebook post or a LinkedIn post, you kind of have to focus on one kind of audience at a time. But with newsletters and segmentation, you can figure out, based on their interests and how you organize people in your newsletters, you can send a newsletter to those who are interested in the restaurant information, those who will be interested in lodging, and those who might be interested in the community aspects of your business. So newsletters are not just about sending out information. Absolutely, it's about understanding where you're sitting with your audience. and they're flexible. I've yet to come across most companies that I don't think could benefit from a newsletter in some capacity. And the flexibility of them is that you can be as offhanded or hands-on with your content as possible. So for some businesses, quarterly makes sense or seasonal makes sense. But for others, or depending on your segmentation, weekly might make sense. So there's huge flexibility, not only in when you can communicate with people, but when it makes sense in your business and in your business's protocols to do so.
Hey, Allison, I hate to jump in here for a quick question.
Yes.
Would you be able to turn on your video? We've got lots of requests. People want to see Allison K. So,
okay. I'm so sorry. Yeah. I thought,
I didn't have the ability to do that. So,
okay.
There we go.
See Nick Fry. Oh, can you guys see me? I see Nick. I'm so sorry, my darlings.
Right back, go right back to it. There you go. Thanks, Allison.
Okay. Oh, thank you guys. Okay. Let us wander away from my white space and back into the world of newsletters, huh? So newsletter cons. They're not large ones, but I always like to give caveats and things so that we understand what we want to do with our business. And one is, the biggest thing is content. Allison, we're not sure what we want to put in right now. And I understand that, but I think the problem that stops a lot of businesses from doing newsletters is that they're already stuck on the content section, or the more common part is the first newsletter goes out, but it's what do we do with the second newsletter? And that content creation can take time, but the great news is that many people are in that situation. So there is a bevy of information as far as webinars and tutorials and newsletter systems that help you just create that content. So I would say that you want to stop this because you're unsure of how to process the next 5 newsletters. There's lots of options and lots of resources for creating that content. And let me see here. And the other one is that we can't perfectly control how emails land in inboxes. So there's a couple of things with this. It's both from a technical aspect and also just getting used and finding your space with your audience. So email delivery, depending on the platform you're with and what kind of email client people have. So that's, do they have Gmail? Do they have Hotmail? You might not necessarily be able to control absolutely what that email looks like to the end user and how they're going to open it. But ideally with newsletters, your key piece of ingredient with that is your subject line, and ensuring that your content, no matter how great it looks, that content has to really speak to people. And you're going to hear me say this a lot. I am a designer by trade, but the messaging is crucial. And the design, you will see a much higher engagement rate with newsletters that have really thoughtful messaging, that are really beautiful design that kind of falls apart in different systems. So there's lots of fantastic platforms out there. If you're just wanting to dip your toes in newsletters, I recommend MailChimp. It's one of the simplest ones out there. And for our needs, they also provide a free plan that gives you 1 user and 1 list up to 2,000 contacts, which can be a great start for a lot of people. And do note, my lovelies, that you don't need to have a giant list to be successful with newsletters. I have seen giant news lists with abysmal open rates, and I've seen very small curated lists with fantastic engagement. So MailChimp can be a great way to get started, especially if you have under 2,000 contacts. And if you need more, it does become $12 a month, but well worth it if you're getting up to that 50 contact level. MailChimp is, of course, well documented and well supported. So ideally, no matter what your website is hosted on or what platform it's running on, you'll have availability through MailChimp to add up signups and do other really neat things. Your VAs can help you. If you have interns that are working with you or anyone else in your business, then it's a really easy to onboard system. But the one thing I do want you to know about is that it does end up only being number 5 in the top ranked delivery. And that's because due to it being such a popular platform, spamming techniques have been used in it. So some some email clients, like Gmail in particular, are going to put those emails into the promotions tab as opposed to the inbox. So it's just about managing the expectations of what we can do. If you need better delivery rate, then you will have to go to a platform that costs a bit more, such as ActiveCampaign or ConvertKit. And if you're looking for another free option, there's also TinyLetter if you need a very bare bones system. So lots of options inside of newsletters. So as far as next steps, One thing I notice a lot of my clients is that they have a newsletter, but they don't dedicate a page on their website for that newsletter sign up. And that's key. So when you're talking about it on social media or wanting to send someone there, if you send it to your homepage and your newsletter is buried in the footer or on the sidebar, especially on a mobile phone, people aren't going to see it. It's way down the bottom of their visual list. So the other thing you want to do with that page is make sure that you tell people what they're going to expect in the newsletter and how often. The point of newsletters is not to have lots and lots and lots of emails for the sake of it, is to have people who are interested and want to remain engaged with your content. And for right now, so you might be saying, Allison, this is great, I have it, but I feel like I can't really work with it right now because of what's happening. What kind of messaging can I send out? And it needs to be said that in all of the work I'm seeing in the open rates with newsletters is that people want to hear from you and they want to hear from your business. So what we're doing is we're not disappearing on the front of talking about our business. We're just shifting a little bit what we're talking about. So some options you can have is behind the scenes while you're awaiting reopening. Lots of people get to see your space or your business when it's all laid out, ready to go. But if you're doing renovations, if you're building on a new section, people want to know about that. Trying out new recipes, they want to know about that. You can also put in tips and tricks that might be relevant to the time. So that could be during the springtime, or maybe let's say that part of your business is about conservation. While you can't really go out and have your mushroom field picking expeditions right now, perhaps you want to talk about the larger concepts around that. And of course, it is always okay, as long as the messaging is put out correctly, to talk about past events. People obviously cannot get married right now in spaces, and they can't have their family reunions, but they are still looking down the road, and they are still dreaming and thinking and planning with their loved ones what's happening. So with the right kind of tasteful approach, you can absolutely still engage with people through newsletters. And of course, you want to make sure you're promoting this on social media. On social media, you don't need to be just talking about anything else. Remind people that they don't have to wait for Twitter to tell them what's going on. They can be able to deliver this great information right into their inbox when they want it. And of course, for those of you who have been using newsletters for a while and you're waiting to reopen, now is the time to set up your tags and segments. Tags and segments are internal ways that we break apart our audience so that we can target them. And tagging could be anything from the kinds of clientele that you have to how you receive them. Were they a newsletter sign up on your website? Did you give a presentation and they came in through there? Did you partner with an association and that's when they found out about you and signed up? So for all of you that are not starting out with newsletters but are getting into the thick of it, now's the time to tag and segment so that when we reopen and everything gets right up and ramping up, you're already going to be able to target that key audience. So before I move on, is there any pertinent questions in the chat in regards to newsletters specifically?
I had a few good questions. So can you hear me, Allison?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Great. So one of the questions we had was the cheapest plan I can see on MailChimp is $29.99 plus tax a month US. Where do I find the $12 a month option? And that was from Alicia Sims, I believe.
Okay, so there is still a free account. So I don't know, sometimes what happens when we do searches, we'll click on an advertisement for that website and sent, but to the best of my knowledge, there absolutely is a free plan. The limitations with it would be, of course, the one user, and they don't let you do like nurturing sequences. The only automation they'll let you have is if someone signs up, do they get something immediately in their inbox? So I can definitely send a link later, but there definitely is a free option, or I've got a whole host of clients who are going to be calling me angrily tomorrow.
Yeah, perfect. So that was a great question, Alicia. We'll send that information out later. Sheila Van Schack says, email subject line, what are key do's and don'ts?
Oh my goodness. So key do's and don'ts. Key do's, you want to keep it short and you don't want to give everything away. Now that's a balance. It really does depend on your business. But what I like to suggest to people is before I always write about 3 or 4 of my own, and you might want to put it around to some people and talk about your language a little bit as well. But I like to keep it very short and sweet. Open-ended questions are great. Not clickbaity per se. I've seen mixed results with using emojis. I'm still waiting on the data to come out. I know that more in industries that are like more around apparel and like particular items work really well for them. But depending on what you're talking about, maybe once in a while you want to put a leaf emoji in there, understanding that not all mail clients are going to show it. There has been also some suggestions in data that if you start off with someone's name, it works. So in MailChimp and other systems, you'll have systems in place where people, when they sign up, they'll pre-fill out their name, their email, maybe sometimes a birthday or other things. So you can use that in your automation. But I have also read suggestions that while it's okay to put people's names in, you might want to not do it every time, because people kind of clue in that you're not necessarily talking to them, you're using that system.
Right. That's a great questions. And one last question, and we'll move on. If there's any other questions, we can ask at the end, of course. This is from Sarah Cameron, and she says, what is the ideal length of a newsletter?
It all comes down to whatever your content is. And that could also differentiate not only from what the business is, but what's happening in the business. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve. I mean, right now it's a bit different, but let's say you were having a flash sale, or you've opened up a new row of cabins, let's say. You might want to have a very short and sweet newsletter that just explains that we have a lovely new setup here, one photo, one headline, maybe everything but 250 words, and then a button that gets them to your website. So the idea in that case is we can do our best work if we can get them to the website as soon as possible. Now, maybe on the flip side, you might have an organization or a business where, let's say, again, we're going to go with the ones that give nature tours, and they can't do it right now for reasons. Then what you might want to do is maybe one newsletter might be a long format. It might be upwards of 4 or 5 paragraphs. That's just talking about the nature of, let's say, a certain kind of mushroom that grows. Again, ideally, you want to get people, it depends on the messaging there again. So that the other thing I could offer to people is that sometimes in the design of a newsletter, it's ideal that your main content piece is about the front and center, the most important thing you want, but you can automate some smaller pieces. So that could be upcoming events that are happening. Maybe every month in your newsletter, you recognize someone in your community, and you can change those little pieces out. So there's no hard and fast rules. The best thing we have are our metrics, and then we give it about 6 months of running newsletters, and we start investigating that and tweaking them.
That's a great question. So we have one last one from before we move on, and it's from Lane Collins. And the question is, do you recommend the use of photography in a newsletter, and how often, question mark?
Ooh.
And second question is, where do you get those images from?
Perfect. So I would say do it sparingly. Again, it depends. One thing, some people are on their phones and they're using their data, and so we want to be conscientious of how much of their sweet TELUS time that we are using. So one splash photo can be great to use. You want to optimize that for the web, and I have a resource at the end of this presentation that will explain optimization better, because it's a little bit out of scope of this. But some people kind of jam it full of photography, and at that point maybe you want to be writing a blog post, and also if it's really important to you that that photography is all laid out spectacularly, that's not going to be the case in a lot of newsletter systems, because that mail client is going to kind of chew it up a little bit. And as far as resources, there's some great, actually it's a great idea. I just recently came across a fantastic link that has 50 resources, so I will do that. And there's also like Unsplash and those sorts of free sites. Do note that everyone uses them, and so people could be a little bit tired. There's one secret one I love to use, and it's called Morguefile, and morguefile.com, because back in the days of newspapers, before there was digital photography, they wouldn't run out and take a photograph of the mayor every time, so they would have a big cabinet in this great thing, and they would call it the Morguefile, and they would pull out photos. So morguefile.com is a repository where photographers have put their B-roll, and you can find some amazing stock photography absolutely free. Might not be as clean as some, but it will give you the chance to put in something different, especially for nature photos or photos of Nova Scotia. It's a wealth of information.
That's a great question. We also have Barbershop, where we keep all of our images. It's a website that people can access if they sign up. So we'll include that link of our photography as well. It's, there's some really beautiful shots all over the province, and that, really comes in handy when people know they need a really strong image, but they don't necessarily have it on hand. So,
yes,
and it's available. So I'm just going to mute myself, and we'll keep going, and then we'll come back to any other broader questions at the end.
Fantastic. So we're going to leave the wonderful world of newsletters and enter into probably the lowest hanging fruit of all. This is a pear that is so heavy, it's just dripping on you to be used. And that's Google My Business, which is Google's listing that pops up when people are using Google Search or Google Maps. And the great thing about this one, and the reason I say it's low hanging, is because it's free. It's incredibly simple. Most of the work can be done in an afternoon. Talk about a win-win situation. And it's being used on one of the most used search engines on the planet right now. And the only thing about it is, I do want to put a caveat in, is that it is a Google product. And sometimes for us smaller businesses, it can be really hard to get a hold of Google when things go a little bit less than planned. So let's talk about this a little bit. So you can see here we have Amy's Bakery, for example, and we have photos, and we have a rating system, and we have the address and hours. And as time goes on, it'll even put in what the best hours of that business are. So what are the pros of Google's Google My Business? So the best thing I can tell you about it is there's absolutely no code, there's no jargon, because it's a listing service. It's all about times and when you're open and your services and your location. And it gives you visibility on the world's largest search engine and maps, which is always a plus. So what you're adding to this now is not only are you coming up in searches, but depending on the nature and the competitiveness of what people are searching for, they immediately, poof, on the right-hand side are getting an idea of what your business is. And that's it's really encouraging for users when they're looking at a listed view to then get into some really juicy things like photography. And it's an easy way for people to leave reviews. All they need is a Gmail account to leave one. And we definitely have stats that prove that people are more likely to engage if it's as frictionless as possible. So it's a great way for people before they even go to your website to sort of validate what's happening with your business as far as whatever their needs might be. And for those of us who do prefer to use third-party booking services such as hotels.com or booking.com, etc., there is a linkage system that can happen very quickly within Google My Business. There's a caveat to that, and I will get into that momentarily. But the other thing that people don't realize about Google My Business is that it gives you insights. I am a numbers nerd, guys, but it's because I want you to do the best in your business. And there is a wealth of information. And the other reason why I love Google My Business is that if you're not in a situation to get into some of the other tactics I'm going to talk about, this is a great way to stop assuming what's happening with your potential audience and your guests and actually seeing results. So it provides insights such as queries used to find your business. What words are people searching? And those words are critical to us because what we think our business is and the words we use might not be what our guests use. But if we find out what they are, we can start peppering that into our subject line of our newsletters. We can start using that to create content for our Facebook posts. It can tell you how they searched for you. So were they looking for you by name? If so, you have won the biggest battle on the earth when it comes to online presence. When people know you by your company name, you have won, my darlings. But you could also find out they're searching you by category. So were they looking for camping in Cape Breton, for example? That could be very useful for you when you're planning all of your marketing and your online presence. Or where you search with other similar brands, depending if you consider them competition or your cohorts. This could be a great way for you to find out where you're sitting in the marketing positioning of your own business. And it will also tell you if after they searched, did they then visit your site? Did they request directions? Which photos that you put up did they look at? So again, it's a total gold mine of finding out what people are actually interested in and making those changes as need be. But the only cons I can find with this, and it's just more the nature of Google itself, is that when it comes to reviews, it can be time consuming to rectify ones that are bad or fake. So let's talk about the bad ones first. Someone has a less than a stellar experience with it and they leave a poor review on Google My Business. You cannot delete it. There's a series of articles I've included in my resources of how to work through these, but the number one thing is to reach out to that person, explain your case, and see if they're willing, once you've had that discussion, to amend that. So we're talking about the basics of PR here. But there's also fake reviews. My darlings, no matter if you're home or if it's your junk pile, there is spam. We are forever there'll probably be spam until I'm old and gray for sure. But sometimes spam reviews do happen, and Google My Business has a system in place, but it might not necessarily be as fast as you might want it. Which brings me up to my other point, is that troubleshooting can be tough for smaller businesses when it comes to Google My Business. They'll often want you to go through their protocols and then ultimately talk to a human. But I have had clients who have been a little bit frustrated by this, especially around things with third-party booking companies like Booking.com. Every once in a while, part of the tech continuum is that we get stuck in this loophole where Booking.com says it's Google My Business's fault. Google My Business says it's Booking.com's fault, and there can be some time to get that resolved. And I also I do appreciate that this is the idea of third-party booking systems is a bit divisive in the community anyway. So I would recommend in this case, before you hook it up, to talk with associates about those compensation fees that they have and their experience with working with that. So as far as next steps with Google My Business, if you don't got it, go and claim your business before somebody else does. And you want to do this, I recommend using a Gmail account just so you're keeping everything neat and tidy. And you can fill out your details, and while you're doing so, they will verify you. They will call, email, or so quaintly send you a postcard. I actually kept my postcard because I can't wait till I'm old and gray as an auntie and show my nephews, back in the day of the internet, they used to send you a card. And that's how they're going to verify you as a business. It's a pretty quick turnaround. And while you're awaiting that, you can complete your Google My Business information. I know there's a couple of people out here who started this and then they got sidetracked with many things, and their progress bar is sitting around 80% or 70%. Another great thing about Google My Business is they have that progress bar and helps us out. So if you need to get back into it, put in those photos. Photos are worth 1,000 words. And now that we know that we can see which photos people are interested in and their captions, you want to go ahead and do that. And the other thing to think about is it's time for you to ask your guests and your preferred clientele to leave reviews. A lot of people feel that it's one of those things that you hope they fill out the comment card when they were visiting, or they'll just wake up one day and go, I must write a review for Mushroom Co. It's okay to ask people, especially right now, for reviews. Use your newsletter and send out a broadcast and saying that you now have a Google My Business listing and you would love it if anybody wants to share stories about their experience. That's great. Or you can even email or call guests or associates of yours that you know really love your business to help get those reviews up. It's okay to ask for reviews. It's okay to ask for feedback. We're businesses and we deserve to know the best way we can serve our clients and our guests. And for those of you who have all of this filled out, then I certainly hope that you will take this time to review your insights and sit on them, ruminate, and think about how you can apply what people are interested in, what you're being found in search to help power up your business. And of course, right now with COVID-19, Google has released a number of things that they can do to help us out right now. And they do recommend that you can update your hours. You can also mark yourself temporarily closed, that people understand that your business has not gone out of business. You're simply in the holding pattern until times can come. And they also, you can write little posts inside of Google My Business, and they now have 5 different kinds of posts you can make. One is specific to COVID-19. There's also offers. That's things like discounts, or maybe you have an online webinar coming up, updates, events, and products. So any questions from the chat regarding GMB?
Yes, there is actually. No surprise there. So first question would be, can you respond to reviews on Google My Business? That's from Stephanie Vincent. And actually, it's funny because one of my notes was to say, I would encourage, of course, people to follow up, like you said, but it's even more important to follow up online so that when people are kind of looking at a negative review, I think that a lot of times they're looking at how did the business respond to it.
That would be it. That's absolutely it. And you'll see pretty much in every article and in the resource I give, this is a chance for us to be do our best in PR. And of course, when we remain quiet, then people's minds create these huge things of, well, they didn't answer what's going on. So as far as that, you can respond inside of there. And of course, I would say a follow-up. Again, I'm not a PR specialist, but if you do happen to know that person and you need to have a secondary follow-up as well, do what you can. But I agree. It's more about Unfortunately, the review system becomes an online discourse system, but if it's also noticed by some that if it's seen that that brand is dedicated to responding, you might also lower the chances of having more of these comments because they suddenly realize that they can't scream into the void like this. This company is actually quite accountable and will respond in kind immediately.
So you can reply then? Okay. The other question would be, this was actually came up at the very start. So let me just see if I can find the question. Sorry, I'm just looking right here. Oh, we need to verify our Google business account and have been told we must wait because we are not a priority due to Google's need to serve COVID priority businesses. Is there an alternative to Google Business that will provide the same service?
I would say I'm not aware of what other ones would have. As far as like being listed in Google, there would be only Google's option. I was unaware that I know that they had sort of cinched down a little bit on how quickly they would respond to say like address changes due to COVID-19. But unfortunately, I don't have the expertise to speak on what another alternative would be that would be at the same ranking level as Google My Business.
That's all the questions we have right now for Google My Business.
Okay. Oh, did I hear someone else just pipe in there?
Not that I can see. So if we do, we'll cover it at the end.
Absolutely. Okay. So next we're going to leave the world of things that others provide, and we're going to look more internally into our website auditing. So what this means is something that you should be doing. I mean, I'm in the web world, so of course this is my world, especially once or twice a year, you should be reviewing your website to make sure it's working its hardest for you and your guests and audiences. So a website audit is when you, with purpose, go through your website and make sure that it's doing the things and it's operating at the best capacity for your needs. And the great thing about it is indeed free. And it could take a few hours to a few days, depending on how much content you have and what you're trying to resolve with your website. There is no skills required except the ability to listen if you're going to be doing interviews with guests and preferred clientele, and the ability to think outside of our own shoes as business owners, step back and think what's really important to our visitors. And the only caveat that website auditing tends to have is that we do sometimes as business owners suffer from internal bias, and we're going to cover some ways to avoid that with it. So some pros with website auditing is that while you're going through this, you are absolutely going to look and refining your business goals and who you are to your guests and what their needs are. So we're no longer talking about how pretty the website is or how fast it is. We're talking about, is it delivering the information that it needs so that my business can thrive and I can do the best job for my guests and my clientele. And a website audit cuts down on busy work that is detracting us from our goals at hand. So you might be maybe in a situation where you're not sure what to do with your website and become obsessive with changing the color of buttons, when the website audit might turn out that what you really need is a blog section. So instead of spending all this time tweaking colors, there needs to be a focus on something a little more important in the grand scheme of things. And the con of website audits is it is easy to create bias in an audit. So I recommend, if possible, to interview some of your favorite clientele, if you can, to get it right from the mouth of them, as opposed to us trying to sit inside a persona, if you can. But I'm also going to go through methodology if you're not comfortable doing that or you don't have the capacity to do so. And the other con could be that depending on what you turn up in your website audit, you may be limited to how much you can do based on the kind of website platform you have, the skills you have available, or the budget you have to enlist the help of a third service provider. So when it comes to website audits and you want to speak to and have a very short interview with someone, it can just be on the phone. Can be less than 10 minutes. You can ask questions, and people generally, because they know you're the owner, they're still going to want to put the best foot forward. They're not really going to necessarily say very bad things, but I would encourage you to listen carefully to how they say their answers and what they're going to come up with. So you might say to them, how likely are you to recommend our website to a friend? And we have a system with this that if anybody under, out of like a series of 1 to 10, 1 to 5, if they're going, I give it a 3, you have some work to do, because that's someone who might not necessarily, they might like you, but they might not feel comfortable relaying your information on to somebody else. Then you get up into like the 8, 9, 10 level out of a scale of 1 to 10, then you know that you're creating strong brand presence and then a wonderful, enjoyable experience for people on your website. You want to ask them, did they have trouble finding something? Maybe you weren't aware that there was something there that you thought didn't need to be happen, and they asked for it and said, well, I really couldn't find information about your chef. And that comes up in 3 or 4 interviews. Maybe it's time for you to create a profile about your chef. And you want to make sure that, is our blank clear? And that blank could be the most important aspect that you want to have. So is our pricing clear? Are our amenities clear? Are our services clear? You want to think back as a business to frequently asked questions you're always answering, or things that your receptionists have to say time and time again when people come into your business to remind them. So are there any gaps that you have that these interview processes are bringing up? And it's always good to ask them, who else did you consider before visiting our website? Again, that puts you in a position to think about it from a marketing position. Gets you thinking about, well, maybe I need to go look at their website and see if there's not something there that I can also pull into my site, because that obviously seems to be fulfilling a need of our audience. And if you don't have that availability, and or you do, the next step is you're going to walk through your website as one of these people. So there's many ways to do website audits. In my supplementary, I also have different varieties of like the simplest ones to the more complicated ones. But the one that I think would work well for us today is walking through as a persona. So a guest persona is when you make up basically a pretend version of your ideal guest or clientele. And depending on your business, maybe there's 2 or there's 3 of them. And we get specific. We talk about their age, their occupation, other traits like where they're from. Are they someone who doesn't have a lot of time? Are they somebody who's an avid reader? This is all going to affect the content of your website. And like, what do they need to accomplish? Which I'm going to cover in a little bit more detail in step number 2, but why are they coming to the website? And words they use about your business. As covered earlier, just because we say certain words in our business doesn't mean that is ringing with others. So one person's idea of rustic camping is very different from someone else's idea. So glamping for one person is different from somebody else. Or the idea of what fine dining is could be different. Or where they think the South Shore lies could be different. All of these words can be in particular. So you need to understand the language that they use, because ultimately we're trying to convert them, and not us as the business owner. And the next step is you're going to pretend that you're going to go through your website, not through every page, but only to fulfill a certain situation. So an example could be, maybe you're going to pretend that you're an American newlywed planning a honeymoon. This is important because in America and Canada, we have different words between lodging and accommodation. So there's even that keyword factor can be determining in how our website is going to perform best. But an American perspective person is very different than the local yoga instructor who's looking to book a retreat. They don't necessarily need to be explained about the wonderful beauty of Nova Scotia. They may be more interested in what your ethics are around nature, or around holistic practices within the community. Or maybe you have to pretend that you're vegans looking for a fine dining experience. So these users all have very particular things they have to do. This will give you a laser focus when you go through the website in that situation. And the questions you want to be asking yourself can include, are we setting the right tone? So is our messaging lining up with what that person wants to hear? Is it easy to read? Are we working with a lot of retirees who might have different vision capabilities than us? And is our text large enough? Is it readable? Is it digestible? Is it easy for them to complete their task? If the end goal is that they're very busy people from New York that want to book lodging, are we burying that lodging information in the bottom of our website? We need to bring that up to the top. Are there obvious clickable elements? So if you want people to book, if you want people to call, is that crystal clear? Are you making a hierarchy of design to ensure that people can do these things to the best of their ability? And does it flow well? Do I have to do a lot of clicking to get to the bottom of something? Or the opposite problem, do I have one page that's so full of content, it's really hard for me to do the job that I need to do as that guest? And based on those findings, you will then apply those adjustments as need be. And maybe that requires, oh my goodness, we need to create a whole new page about this particular content that we think is really going to talk to this particular core audience. Or maybe you need to remove redundant or obsolete content. This is known as the ROT method, the ROT method, and I have some notations for that for you. So basically, maybe you can actually encourage the situation to move quicker by simply removing some content that's no longer relevant. Are your calls to action clear? Calls to actions are things that are clickable, the button to click, the phone number to call, the form to fill out. Are they easy to use, and are they crystal clear that you as a website owner want people to do this so they can enjoy your business? You can look at performance. Maybe the site's content's great, but the content is slow. And if you know that a lot of your guests are coming from areas with less than stellar internet service provision, then maybe you want to make sure that you have a website that's going to load quickly. You want to think about SEO, or search engine optimization, which is keywords that people use, and that your website's designed in such a way, both for humans and for robots, to understand what that content is. And of all of this, what parts are you going to do and what parts are you going to outsource? So are there any questions regarding website auditing?
Allison, I had written down a question here. So you had mentioned, you want to find out some of the keywords that people were using, and different people, depending on where they're from, may use different words such as lodging versus accommodations.
Yes.
Is there a way for these businesses to find out what these keywords are?
Sure, there's a number of them. There is, number one, your own Google Analytics, which we'll get to momentarily. We talked about the calls in Google My Business. Google Trends are fantastic. I'll use a non-tourism example, but I used Google Trends recently with an insurance company. We wanted to find out if people actually use the acronym RESP or if they spell it out, and in which parts of Canada do they use that. So Google Trends is a great way where you can look at you can pit two terms against countries or what have you. It'll give you an overview of what's happening. Another great one is Answer the Public. And what happens there is Answer the Public is you enter in a search term. It'll actually give you a list of questions alphabetized by who, what, when, and why, to give you an idea what people are talking about. And then you can get into paid things like Rush, REMS Rush, and sorts of things like that. Those tools tend to be quite expensive. And ideally, you might want to work with a search engine optimization specialist to dig really deep inside of there.
Perfect. Just wanted to let everyone on the call know that although that says the webinar is 10 to 11, it's not going to be a hard 11 o'clock cutoff. So we're just going to let Allison finish. We're going to wrap up with our question and answer. We're not going to rush. And if you have to leave at 11, that's more than okay. And we'll just send you the recording for later. We hope you guys can stay the whole time, of course, but just wanted to let everyone know not to be stressed out that we're going to rush through it, or that it's just going to end at 11. So just one more Q&A just came up here, Allison. Oh, someone's just saying hi. That's great.
Hello.
Okay, right back to you, Allison.
Okay, so social media automation. Social media is the low-hanging fruit that we all know how to go on. We have an account or two, but sometimes we get stuck on how to be productive with our time with it. So social media automation takes the guesswork and the time involved in being on your phone constantly or at your computer to be putting out content. So social media automation is a great way because we deal with frequency. Now, if there's one thing you're going to pay for, it might as well be social media automation. I've yet to find a free version of something that either just went into a 14-day trial that you had to pay for, or really wasn't worth your time. So you're looking around $15 a month for one. But the great thing, the trade-off is that once you get rolling with social media automation, you can knock off a whole month's worth of content in 1 or 2 hours, which is fantastic and frees up your time. They're incredibly easy to use interfaces. And the only caveat is, again, what are you going to put down for content in your social media? And we're going to cover that. So some pros with social media automation is that we're playing into frequency. And there are two very important parts about social media: frequency and being social. So in the frequency, what we need to understand is that just because you put up a Facebook post does not mean everyone will descend on it and read it. We need to continuously be frequent in putting our messaging out there, and social media automation allows us to do that, which then frees up time for us to engage, which is the critical part of social media. You can't just blast everything out there. You need to be responding to comments, asking questions, adding people, and creating conversation around these pieces and sharing in other people's content. And it's a great task for new staff. So if you have staff that ordinarily be working on the grounds right now and they have work to be done, then you don't necessarily want to give them the keys of creating the content, but a great way to onboard somebody in your business is to have them do the social media scheduling, so they're getting used to the nature of your tone, the kind of content you have, and also allows them to free up their time to also engage with your audience. And social media automation offers reports and insights that can help you as far as which post responded better, better hours of the day to post, and all kinds of lovely features. And the only cons of it is, especially right now, is that pre-schedule content, we set it and forget it, but we need to be aware that something could change in the world rather quickly, and we want to respond to that. We've all seen well-meaning brands that put out a probably not meant to be tone-deaf message, but you can tell it was automated and didn't consider what was happening in this world. So while it does free up our time, we can't forget what we put. We need to be aware that we can very quickly in automation just draft or move something or turn off a channel if we want, to make sure that we're stepping in practice with what's happening in the world. So all the social media platforms that do automation, I prefer Buffer. I know that Hootsuite is also one that people love, but I find Buffer doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it's a lot easier to use, I find, especially if you need to get up and running now. And the Pro plan is $15 a month, and that allows you to publish to 8 social accounts of up to 100 posts and have one user access. It's a very easy drag and drop scheduler. It can be in these little bricks that you just drop your content in, decide you want to move a different date, just click it and drag it down. And they have lots of little tips and tricks as you're working in that content. And after a while, it learns through machine learning what your ultimate time of day to post will be, which saves us a ton of time. We don't have to figure that out. They'll figure it out for us, which is great. And I personally use it on my Android to manage a number of social media accounts that I have. And the Android system has been great, especially if you're on the go and there's something relevant you want to share with your audience. They have great support as far as both their Android and iOS app. And other options you could have would be Hootsuite, Social Jukebox, Edgar, Later, and IFTT. And IFTT is free, but it's less social media management like drag and drop and more setting up conditions. So if I post this on Instagram, please send it to Twitter in this way. It could be another great fashion. So with social media automation, with next steps, right now, you might be thinking, okay, that's great, but what am I going to put in content right now? So one is evergreen content. And what we mean by evergreen content is things that are timeless or timely, that doesn't matter if it was written 4 weeks ago, a year ago, it's still going to be relevant to your audience. So that could come in the form of testimonials. It's still great to celebrate what people have enjoyed about your business, and it's better that others do the talking for us than ourselves. You can also put in timeless blog posts. So maybe you have some blog posts that you wrote a couple of springs ago that after you read it still makes sense in the world right now. Or you have a blog post that could be posted any time of day. Just because you wrote it a couple weeks ago or a couple years ago doesn't mean you can't talk about it now, because not everyone has read that blog post. And you can also talk about the media coverage. Everyone understands that a number of businesses can't operate in the way they used to, but they still want to share in that celebration of things that have covered very important messaging or causes that you did. So it's great to put that inside of your social media automation. If your business is active with blogging, one of the most common things I see with my clients is that they make a blog post, they publish it, and they put it on Facebook or they put it on LinkedIn, and then they're done. But again, we need to play into frequency. And so I recommend with blog posts in your social media automation, you're going to talk about it the day it was published, the next day, 1 week after that, 2 weeks after that, 1 month, 2 months. You kind of see where I'm going with this. Again, you're giving people the benefit to go and read content and also dive deeper in your website instead of just hoping they saw it the one time you posted it. And the other thing you can do with social media automation is you could acknowledge your community. So an example for Twitter might be that you might want to and thank you your service providers, your suppliers, community members, your the personal accounts of your employees. All of this could be great content to start to put into your coffer while you await opening to give people top of mind about your business. So are there any questions about social media automation? Having a read.
We don't have any questions right now.
Okay.
It's funny when you talk about the evergreen content. That's a really interesting way to bring it forward, because to me it's the exact thing that people actually look for and get a real comfort for a business when they can see other people through testimonials or articles or anything like that. It definitely brings that sense of comfort for a potential visitor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it made me think. I mean, yesterday, Tourism Nova Scotia launched a video on YouTube called Nova Scotia Still Together. And it just talks about kind of where we are, social distancing, but, when we're ready to welcome visitors, we'll be ready. But it's just kind of very positive messaging. And that's on our channel. We'll share it later. But, again, if you're looking for content to share, it's about a positive message about, when we are ready to welcome visitors again, and it's really great. So we'll share that later. But again, that could be something that you share, because again, it's a message of hope and positivity. And as a tourism operator, we are definitely going to want visitors to know that when it's ready, we're there. Two quick questions came up. I have an eco-friendly business. I struggle with content. Where can I get content?
Where can I get content? Well, the first step would be to do some exercises. Dailyprogress.com is a great resource, a local Haligonian that has so much information around how to get ideology, like how to come up with concepts. You can, to find content, your first question is more, what do I want to talk about? And I really believe in cutting as quickly as possible to the meat of something. And I will say, are there frequently asked questions you get asked about your business that you could abbreviate into short little did you knows? Are there any other accounts that you look up to, and you could start maybe going through their timelines and seeing what kind of content they put up and see what sort of resonates with you and go, oh, yes, actually, we talk about a similar thing as well, but I want to put that Nova Scotian slant on it. So just because you are into these 5 accounts doesn't mean me, who is into your business, knows about these 5 accounts. I'm interested in you. So you can give that creative spin to it, how-tos, works in progress, a great article you share. In my own business, my news articles are actually about really random, interesting stats I find online. I talked about people, how much chips people eat in Canada, $65 a year we spend on chip eating alone. That's insane. But it's kind of part of what makes sense inside of your business. So ideologing of thinking about how you can brainstorm common questions, ask your friends, what did they not realize about your business that they're over the moon for, and your own passions. You started your business for a passion for something, and it's fantastic to share that right now, and people are interested in that and they want to hear it.
That's great. Two quick things. I think we're going to send out later on. Allison's mentioning a lot of different websites and different links to different things. So maybe we'll try to share that information, because a lot of them are the questions of how do you spell the website you're speaking about. So we'll just share links to that later.
Yes.
One question is, what is the appropriate use of stories versus posts?
Okay, so stories versus posts. So we're talking, there's a couple of different, we have both Facebook and we have Instagram that are using stories versus posts. So it really does depend on the messaging, but posts are sort of the more professional, forward-facing, more timely content, and stories are more tidbits or glances into your life, or more like off the top of your head kind of content. Because of course, with the stories, you can store them to some extent in your little timeline, but a lot of people understand that these are just sort of quick, ephemeral kind of things that aren't going to last for a long time. So maybe there's something that you're working through, or you want to show a series of progress shots. I also love stories when you really can't flesh out a full blog post and you're really excited about something, but you just literally need 10 seconds to talk about it. That's when you want to use your stories.
That's perfect. We'll try. How do you get people to follow you on social media? I don't think it's you in particular, but the business at hand, of course. So what are some opportunities people can do to get people to start to follow them on social media?
So the first is you got to follow other people, and you got to follow people with intent. So you need to think about, okay, today I want to go after all my community members, and tomorrow I'm going to start following all of my suppliers. Then I'm going to start following all of the dog shelters, because that's something that we believe in strongly as a business. So the first step is that you need to follow, but you're not following for a follow. these followers are going to be filling up your timeline with information so that when you're looking at it, you want to be able to relate to that. So you don't want to just follow for the heck of it. You want to be intentful with that, and you want to start engaging. Social media is about being social, and that's like, people can sniff a mile away a brand that has 16,000 followers but only follows 10. Like, they're going to go, okay, well, obviously I never want to engage with them because they only engage with 10 people. So that's the quickest method. I do believe that there might be a chance another webinar might get a bit deeper into social media. So I'm happy to answer these questions, but I'm a little concerned that we're going down social media in general and not just social media automation, only because the time is short and I still have one more section to go to. Hopefully that makes sense.
That's great.
Are there any other social media automation questions?
Not right now.
Okay.
That I can see.
Okay, one more, my darlings, and of course at the end, if you have any other social media questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them to the best of my ability. And the last one is my personal favorite, and then one that's probably giving people some shivers at home, like, oh no, she's going to talk about Google Analytics. And what Google Analytics is that it's a system that monitors what the heck people do when they're on your website. So all this work we put in and all these blog posts and design and social media and newsletters, how do we know what we're actually achieving with it? Google Analytics can tell us. Now, it's a free program to use. It's a Google account. It's a Google product. So, of course, it's free because we are the guinea pigs. And the thing about it is, I am not going to sugarcoat it. It is not the easiest thing to get going with, but it's also not as much of a mountain as people think it is. So I recommend that you do an online tutorial or get some one-on-one coaching, and then you'll review it basically once a quarter is most likely. Of course, it depends on your business and the nature of what your business cycles are, to take a quarter, and it's an hour every quarter to review your analytics. And so I would put this at an intermediate level, but if you're at a stage with your website where you really want to get the most out of it and you want to get the most out of your social media, because Google Analytics tracks that too, then this will be the job for you. And of course, the caveat being that the user interface can seem overbearing. And the other part is, no one talks about numbers in this. And so we might look at a spike and think it's great, or we might see a tiny number and think we're doing awful. And quite possibly the opposite could be true. So the pros of Google Analytics is that it's gathering information without you doing any work. So I have clients say to me, Allison, I installed Google Analytics, but I haven't really looked at it. Am I doing it wrong? And I'm like, no. So until the time you are ready to look at it, Google is just capturing that information, where they're coming from, how they got to your website, who they are and what they're doing. It's just gathering that data. So you can't lose by having it installed on your website. So that's great. It's doing its job until you're ready to look at it. And it also gives you realistic results of your efforts. So I work closely with a lot of companies that are rebranding and redesigning their websites. And so I look at their old data to help decide how we're going to move the new website forward. And when we get digging around in the data, you need to realize that Google Analytics will give you some awesome information and some really humbling experiences. So one example could be is that, let's say that on Twitter, you've noticed that people are talking about a blog post a lot. So you might think to yourself, oh, wow, Twitter is sending lots of traffic to my website about this blog post. But then you look in Google Analytics and it turns out you haven't had very many hits from Twitter at all about that blog post. And you start thinking, oh, those people read my newsletter, then they were on Twitter and noticed me mentioning that article, and now they're talking about it. So Google Analytics is a great way to be realistic with what's actually happening on your website, so we're not making assumptions and wasting our time and activities on our website that aren't in the end going to push our goal and our online presence forward. And it can also automatically send reports to you, so you don't have to be sending a note, just like, oh my goodness, I have to go on Google Analytics and look it up right now. You can actually set up the reports that you want to see, and it'll just email it to you whenever you want to remind you when it's time to have a look at your numbers and strategize. And the real thing about it that I teach is you only need to know about 25% of it. A lot of businesses only need to look at like 2 parts of Google Analytics for like the next 2 years until they're ready for the next step. So it might seem like an overwhelming interface, but the reality is all of it's available to us, but only people like me really go through all of it. But I would say 90% of all my clients, we look at 3 reports mostly and discuss that and make our work based on it. So the cons is the interface can be overwhelming. I recommend not just going into it and looking at it and going, numbers, and then putting it in the basement for the next 6 months. I recommend checking out. There's lots of great free videos with lynda.com, LinkedIn, YouTube to get you started on the basics to help you with that. And also you can do online training or closed groups to help out with that. And the other thing I want to mention is that the data isn't perfect. So there's lots of humans build websites and then humans go on them. And a lot can happen in between that. So the Google Analytics isn't the end all and be all of what's happening on your website. So it's important to realize that you get a sense with a Google Analytics provider what's happening, and they'll kind of help you understand what's healthy for your website and what's not. Because again, you might think a spike is important, but it turns out that that was just an oddball day, or you might be zoomed in on a month and not see much progress. But if you had zoomed out for 2 years, you would have seen a huge improvement in how many page views you had over the years. So it's not perfect, but of course, it's definitely better than assuming that Twitter is sending people to your website, or that this particular listing you're with is giving you insights in that. So the people ask people, what kind of questions can such a system answer? And it can tell you which social media traffic is more likely to convert. And convert just means they do something you want them to do, that people will fill out the form, read the blog, call your website. So with Google Analytics, you could see that you have a lot of Facebook and LinkedIn traffic, but it turns out only the LinkedIn traffic is actually staying on your site long enough to read your content, or they're going through a number of pages that you want them to. So while you might be getting lots of likes and comments on Facebook, if your end goal in business is they need to be on your website to convert, then you're going to find out, oh my goodness, LinkedIn is actually where it's at, and we're going to up what we're doing in LinkedIn based on information. It can tell you where your site visitors are from, what cities they're from, referrals. So let's say that you're coming up right now and you're trying to find ways to reduce costs in your business, and you're a part of a number of listings that claim that your listing will help you get traffic to your website. You can use your Google Analytics and find out, you know what, I'm paying $300 a year for a listing and I had 2 visits. Off it goes on your chopping block as far as that. And also, where are your visitors coming from? Are they searching for you organically? Are they coming in through social media? All of these things. What is it? How are they getting to us? So that you can write better subject lines, create stronger content, and just ameliorate what's happening on your website. What kind of words do they use to find us? If you have Google Search Console set up, then you can get a bit more of a gleaning of what's happening and what words people are using. Sometimes it's awesome and you're like, wow, we're actually showing up in results for the words we want. I've also had clients go, wow, everyone spells our business name wrong. You'd be surprised what you can find inside of it. And are people reading our blog posts? Because maybe you're on the fence if you want to keep doing that or not. And maybe your analytics will tell you that you are on the right track, but you need to just change up what you're doing. Or you know what, in fact, it's not your strongest performer on your website, and you can actually let that rest and not feel bad about it. And of course, our ultimate goal with Google Analytics is what pages that are important to us are performing best, converting best. And once you understand what that means to your business, you can then look at that page and go, that one's performing. Let's reverse engineer what we did on that page and apply it elsewhere so that our other pages can become better at performing in what we want it to do. So as far as next steps, if you haven't installed it, my darlings, install it. If you don't, I'm going to bawl my eyes out today, only because it's one of the greatest resources you can have when you have time to review what's happening on your website. And the other thing I want to let you know is that we don't talk about hits anymore. So I work with clients and they'll say, well, I'm hoping we have lots of hits. That's very 1992. What you need to understand about hits is that if you had a home page with 5 pictures on it, when someone goes to that website, that's 6 hits. It's 1 hit for them to go to the website, and then it's another 5 hits for them, for their browser to access that photo. So we don't really talk in hits anymore. We talk in page views, we talk in behavior, which is how long are people on, what pages are they going through, and we talk about outcomes. So Google Analytics for websites is not about how many visitors you have, it's what they do while they visit your website. And I'm going to leave you one little quick tip here for those of you who have poked around inside and are like, what do I do next, Allison? You can leave annotations. And annotations are little notes that you can post on a timeline so that you can remind yourself what in the heck happened the day that that thing happened. Because of course, in 6 months down the road or 12 months down the road, you might not remember why you had a dip or why all of a sudden your traffic started trending upwards. So you can leave annotations for things like new blog posts when they're published, whenever you've done an update to your site, if you had hosting downtime, because you might forget in a couple of years when you had some downtime there, if you were featured in the media or other offline effects that might affect your traffic. So it's not just about notating what happens on your website, but it's notating anything in your business that you think might affect and bring traffic to your website. So here you can see that what you do is you click this little bottom graph right here. If ever you see a timeline graph, you click create a new annotation, and then you can put in the date that you want to leave your note for. So in this case, this person's talking about they changed some of the content, the copy content on the headphone page, and then they will hit save and it will appear as a little speech bubble on that date in the timeline. So it's at the very far end because they posted this way off on the edge there, but you can keep these private or you can share them with other people. And this is just a great way, especially if you're going to work with a designer or a developer or a Google Ads person down the road. It's good to have annotation so they can understand what your traffic is all about. So are there any questions regarding Google Analytics?
We have some questions. So somebody gave a suggestion. They said they hired somebody from Fiverr.com for very reasonable to set up their Google Analytics for them. It might be a tip to share with our listeners. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, as long as you can validate who that person is, it's not necessarily complicated to set up Google Analytics on your website. In my resources, I have a link for all of the major platforms. So Wix, Weebly, Squarespace, WordPress. So there's lots of plugins and do-it-yourselfers. But yes, if you are uncomfortable with it, absolutely see if you can get someone to do it. Just realize that you are letting have someone have access to the code of your website. So you want to make sure that you trust that individual. But absolutely, that's a great way if you're uncomfortable doing it. But also, I would just say first read and see if you can't do it yourself, because you might be surprised how easy it is to copy and paste a piece of code and put it from one box into another. So great suggestion.
So I guess another follow-up would be someone said, how do you sign up for it? Other people have said it's very complex. So I guess if I was going to leave this webinar, and my first thing I was going to do was to sign up for this, what would be my next steps?
So your next steps would be, first, you have to create a Google Analytics account. And in order to do so, it's a Google product. You have to either have a Gmail account or a G Suite email to do so. So you would go to analytics.google.com and you would sign up. And then it will take you through the steps to apply that to, so you will sign up for Google Analytics and it will give you this piece of code that's about, I say, 10 lines long. So once you have that code, the next step is you need to understand on the website you have where to place that code. So if it's in Squarespace, they have a really easy section that you just drop that code in. And then you will go, if it's WordPress, there's a number of ways to do it depending on your theme. There's plugins that do it for you. Again, I have a resource at the end of this page that will give you a whole list of all of those links to check it out. And then once you're done, what happens is that Google has a live view, and you will basically click around on your website while you have Google Analytics open. And if you see that you have one person visiting it, you're done. That's the very basics of Google Analytics. It's not complicated. I think people see the code and they assume they have to do something with it, but you're copying and pasting it. And I'm not trying to downplay that that's not complicated. I work a lot with nonprofits where we're doing things like creating PayPal buttons, but I always hear from clientele that once we've gone through it, they're like, wow, I wish I'd done this sooner. I didn't realize that the first part was just getting the code in. It's just passively looking at information on your webpage.
We have two more questions. Does Google Analytics work for Google My Business?
Does it work? So they're separate pieces, right? So Google My Business is a Google product, and then Google Analytics is a product. So
I guess, I think the question might be, is there analytics around the Google My Business, like how people are finding you, if they're using your phone number, that kind of stuff? I'm just assuming.
Oh, those analytics. So for Google My Business, it only reports inside Google My Business, and then Google Analytics takes over all information once they're on your site.
Perfect. That's very great. Okay. From Sarah Cameron, you mentioned the top 3 items that Google Analytics that you and your clients usually pay attention to. What are they? And if you share them later, that's fine. But if not, you could mention them now, depending on how long it would take.
Sure. So the thing is that if I'm being perfectly honest, is that like you have to go into the interface and open up some little tabs. So I can say it to you here, but I don't think it's going to be effective because I don't have analytics open. But the most important one is there's 3 main sections. The first one's behavior, and you click site content and all pages. That's probably the most critical one. But to be honest, you need your whole webinar to kind of get into that. And those 3 reports depend on the nature of what my clientele need to do. So Google Analytics is easy, but it's often important to figure out first what your goals are, because your goals might require one report different than another one. So it's not something I can do right now without preparation very quickly, unfortunately.
Perfect. That's all the questions we have for right now.
Okay, fantastic. So my darlings, we survived. So thank you so much for your time today and going through 5 very different ways that we can bolster our online presence. I'm free for any questions. I'm very active on Twitter. Let's follow each other. If you need someone to help follow you with your Twitter account, I'm that person. And what I mentioned before is that the slides for today, an additional PDF that has clickable links for all of these websites I've talked about, and a web page checklist are all available for you at allisonkconsulting.com/TNS. So we have the slides, we have additional reading with 4 or 5 different links of what I've talked about. Plus, if you want a little bit more deeper in SEO and page checklist, I have that available to you as well. So again, guys, thank you so much. I know we went over time today. Hopefully I've filled your head and at least you've been able to pick out 1 or 2 that you think you can move forward immediately with. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. We don't have any additional questions now, so I'm just going to take the screen back over. Again, that was so helpful. I thought there were so many really great points that you covered. And usually, right now, I kind of recap them, but luckily today we were able to kind of recap as we went.
Oh, fantastic.
I think that one of those things where when you start to, even one thing I had written down was when you start to encourage Google reviews, you can then mine those Google reviews for really great testimonials, and then it just starts to build from there. So yes. I think you have so many valuable tips. Luckily, this is recorded. People can go back and review. So we're just going to go back and to my screen, and
sure.
From there. Perfect. So thank you so much, Allison, again. We have our next webinar is going to be next week, Thursday, May 7th at 10 a.m. And it's ramping up as the curve flattens, adapting your business and staff to customer expectations. That will be brought to you by Eva Gooch from STEM Consulting. She is familiar to many of you as she has led our travel trade workshops over the past few years. She's an excellent presenter with lots of great information to share and lots of great experience. So we're really excited about that. Also wanted to let you know that Digital Nova Scotia offers additional online training. It's available to anyone. And on June 19th, they have Allison Knott presenting a website that works for search engines and people. And they have July 17th with Allison Knott again, ways to measure your online efforts. So those are 2 webinars that will be available through Digital Nova Scotia. Again, we'll send the link out later today with all the information as it happens. We have Stay Connected. So if you have any questions for us about anything about our upcoming webinars, if you want to go check our website out and look at the section on COVID-19, check out our frequently asked questions, look at some of the resources, follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter. Also would recommend you guys sign up for our In Touch newsletter. We find it to be a valuable tool. The newsletter helps us to share any recent information, any relevant webinars, any information that we think is very important for industry to know. We'll share it through our In Touch newsletter. I think we covered everything today. I hope to see you next week. We'll send you an email later today with all of the information we promised to share. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Bye, everybody.